today that we're going to be talking about, which is called Move the Needle. And really the content is going to be about Ivamectin, vaccinations, the research around that, and a little bit about what to expect in the next few months from COVID. But this is going to be a two-part session, and next week, Tuesday at 10 o'clock, so don't miss next week, Tuesday, we're going to have a panel of R2 experts, and we're going to put them on the red couch. So of course, it's a virtual red couch, but we're going to put the R2 experts on the red couch, and we're going to have a little bit of a panel discussion. And we're going to hear from Melita Thurling, our head of general liability, Fia Samuels, our head of medical malpractice. We're going to hear from a reinsurer, and we're going to hear from a legal expert. So after today, next Tuesday, we're going to hear a lot more about what this could mean from a liability, legal, and insurance point of view, which is going to be very complicated and I'm sure very interesting. So if you enjoy today, please make sure that you don't miss next Tuesday. Another great thing that I'd like to tell you about this Friday is this Friday between 12 and 3, we are having R2's first ever Braai-through. And this is kind of a way to entertain and see people in a way that we don't gather and in a way that is safe. So this is R2 trying to find a way to connect and show our brokers how much we love them, but in a way that of course is safe. So between 12 and 3 next Friday, if you're in the Johannesburg area at R2's offices, you can drive past. There will be a small team of R2 people there safely braaiing, and we will hand you a Boerewors roll through your window and at least give you a wave and an air kiss hello. So we look forward to seeing you at R2 Braai-through, and you will get details of that later in this week, probably in the next day or two. So look out for that. But today is about moving the needle and Graeme Codrington. And I actually happened to hear some of Graeme's views on social media. And Graeme is a futurist. So he's not a doctor, he's not a scientist, but he studies and spends his life studying disruptive change and what that means for the world. So Graeme has spent a lot of time studying the vaccination, Ivamectin, and what's going on and what's changing in the world with COVID. And I'm really personally looking forward to Graeme, because this is a very topical issue right now around the world, and particularly in South Africa. So I really hope you're going to enjoy today. There will be questions afterwards. So if you have any questions, please put them on the chat group, and Graeme will be sure to answer them. And if you would like to put up your hand and put up on your microphone when you have a question at the end, Graeme would be welcome to have a chat or take any of your questions. So Graeme, over to you. And thank you very much to everyone for joining us. And Tova, if you could put Graeme on the spotlight, and he's going to wow us with his amazing weatherman style presentation skills.
Thanks, Justin. It's great to be with you guys again, and to be here on Tuesday. I love that idea of a Braai-through. I think I might have to join the queue next Friday as well. What a great idea. What a crazy, wonderful world we live in at the moment. As Justin said, I don't have slides to share. I'm going to be sharing on a screen behind me, so to just give you a look and feel of how that looks. I've got my slides behind me. So we should have spotlighted myself for you. So I should be full screen for you now. If I'm not, just roll over my name and then click on pin. Roll over my name again, click on the 3 little dots next to my name and click on fit to frame. If you are in Teams, I know that some of you can't connect via Zoom because of restrictions from your IT, and we're giving you an extra team stream. And I'm not sure there's too many options that you have, so hopefully the stream is working well enough for you on your side. If you are using Teams, the only way you're going to be able to get questions to us is if you know Justin or Tove's cell phone number, and you can send them a WhatsApp. And I suppose if you do and you have a really cool question to ask, maybe do that and they'll send it through to me. For everybody else, please do use the chat box. You know, one of the great things about being in a different space, being in a virtual world like this, I say great, obviously there's a lot of downsides. It would be lovely if we could be together, meet each other, be out of lockdown. But since we're not, let's use some of the additional tools that we have. So you've got the chat function here. It's an additional layer of engagement and conversation that we can use, which, to be honest, I hope in 3, 5, 10 years' time, we'll still be using some of these additional layers of conversation, even in meetings and conferences going forward. So I can see the chat box. Just, I've got multiple screens here in my studio. So when I'm looking there, I'm actually looking at the chat box, and I can see it, and I'll just cast my eye across there every now and again. And as Justin said, you can also raise your digital hand. It's down, if you're in the Zoom session live with us, it's down under the reactions button at the bottom, and you raise your hand, and then I'll invite you to unmute and chat to me. Please don't wait till the end. Throw your questions in now, because I can interact. I can see your question, answer it as we go along. So please feel free to use that chat box. As Justin said, I'm not a medical doctor. And if you were really following the rules that we should have in place during COVID lockdown, you should probably all just switch off the Zoom session now, because if anybody starts with, I'm not a doctor, but I've watched 3 YouTube channels, and I really do think you should watch this video before they take it down, you should normally expect to be listening to a conspiracy theorist and then not give them much time of day. But I'm not here as a medical doctor, so this is not a medical session. You can ask medical questions, and I will give you sources from what I know. And if I don't know, I will say, I don't know. That's fine. We are going to be very comfortable in this session to say, I don't know, we don't know, we will find out. And that's also a part of why this is a 2-part series to come back next week, because there might be 1 or 2 questions you ask either medically, or of course, if you're wanting to ask questions about insurance and legal implications, we can pick those up next week. So again, don't be scared to ask the question. If I don't know the answer, and if the I2 team supporting us today don't know the answer, no problem. We'll take your question, we'll find the answer, and we will bring it to you next week. Okay, so with all of those, what do the legal guys call them? They're not T's and C's, but anyway, with all of those out of the way, let's dive into this. Because as Justin said, I'm a researcher. So I'm a scenario planner. I help clients to anticipate disruptive change. I've been doing it for 20 years. I'm in my 20th year, as this is my full-time job and profession. I can't predict the future. Nobody can. But I and my team at a company called TomorrowToday Global, we are researchers, and we try and anticipate disruptive change, including, by the way, writing scenarios that included global pandemics that would shut the world down. We literally wrote this scenario a few years ago. And not that I'm saying I predicted COVID. I'm not saying I knew when it would happen or how it would happen or how it would play out. But the possibility of having one disease in the world that would just go crazy, go viral, but that this disease would go viral and then cause us to have to quarantine. Honestly, that was a very, very high probability of happening. And a lot of people have been prepared for it over many years. Anyway, that's where I'm coming from the perspective of planning, scenario planning, and disruptive change. So if we take that as the starting point, then there really, in my opinion, is only one graph that we should be looking at. And I think it should be shown on the news every single evening. It's this graph. It's a graph that shows 3 waves. The graph is time across the horizontal axis and number of deaths on this axis. Now, what is this graph? You've got to label graphs. You can't just put them up on the screen. This is the graph of the deaths from the 1918-1919, yes, 100 years ago, the flu pandemic, sometimes called the Spanish flu. Interestingly, called the Spanish flu, not because it was created in Spain or because Spain was the problem, but it's called the Spanish flu because all the other countries in Europe had censorship. They were not allowed to report on this disease because it was right at the end of the First World War. And Spain, who had been neutral through the First World War, were the only one who basically had a free press. So they saw this flu, they talked about it, and everybody labeled it the Spanish flu. That's going to be our problem, isn't it, with the South African variant? It wasn't made here. It was just discovered here because our scientists are, and I can be a little bit patriarchal, what's the word, nationalistic about this? Our scientists are better than some of the others in the rest of the world. And I'm not joking about that. That's one of the reasons why most of the big pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer, J&J, AstraZeneca, and now I see Novavax, use South Africa as part of their vaccine trials, because they know that our epidemiology setup here is one of the best in the world. Our leading epidemiologists are amongst the best in the world. Professor Karim is a member of the Royal Society, the same society that Einstein and Darwin were part of, that Royal Society, and he's an esteemed fellow of that. So anyway, that's just a complete aside. But the South African variant is not because it's our fault, it's because we discovered it. And it's now in 19 different countries around the world. And it is something that is more virulent. It is typical of a second wave. And I say typical because since 1918, we have had 11 flu or coronavirus pandemics around the world. There was the 1958 Hong Kong flu. There was the 1969 Asian flu out of Singapore. There was SARS, MERS, and a number of others. So this is not our first rodeo. We know the pattern of these diseases. We know how these things work. And without exception, I can take that label off the top there, because without exception, every one of these other pandemics over the last 100 years has followed a similar pattern. There's a first wave, then the second wave is worse, right? So the second wave is worse for a number of reasons. One reason is variants. All viruses mutate, right? The flu virus mutates every single year, often multiple times in a year. There are hundreds of mutations of coronaviruses and hundreds of mutations of COVID. And we're trying to track them around the world. But some of them get a little bit more dangerous. The South African variant, oh, pardon me. That's not COVID, by the way. That's just a little water stuck in my throat. Let's talk about these variants quickly. We've got the UK variant, the Brazil variant, and the South African variant are the big three variants that people are worried about. And that is largely because those variants are, the South African variant in particular, 70% more contagious. So they're not more dangerous. If you get the original or you get one of the new variants, you've got exactly the same chances of getting sick or not getting sick, of getting really sick or not getting that sick. The only difference is you've got a 70% increased chance of passing it on to somebody else, which has the effect then of overwhelming the healthcare system if too many people get sick at the same time. We've still got that problem. The biggest danger here is not deaths. Less than 1% of people will die from COVID, and that number's coming down and down and down. It's amazing how much we've been able to reduce the deaths from COVID. Talk about that later. But the biggest issue is if everybody who's going to need to go to hospital gets COVID at the same time, then your hospital system is overwhelmed. We run out of oxygen, we run out of medicines, and then a lot of people die. At the height of the panic of this, a year or so ago, Italy, remember Italy was the big epicenter initially, they were running at 17% death rate. The UK started at a 16% death rate, not because of anything except that their hospitals were overwhelmed. So that's the concern with the variants. So the second wave happens because of variants that come into the system. It also happens because we start to get fatigue. We start to say, oh, can't do this anymore. Or we get a false sense of saying, oh, we've beaten it. That's what I think happened in South Africa back in October or November. We came out of winter. Winter was kind of our big first wave. And then we said, okay, no, we've beaten this now. And we reduced the lockdown, and people were going away and meeting each other and getting back to work and getting back to school. Bang, hit with a second wave, back into lockdown. And we've now over that curve. We're about here now, I think. And so we're going to drop down, but this is part of the point of this presentation. It will be the most remarkable historical circumstance. I don't want to use the word miracle, but the most remarkable historical circumstance if we avoid a third wave. We being the planet and we being South Africa or wherever you're watching this from. I think a third wave is inevitable. In South Africa, where most of you are from, I think the third wave will begin around about Easter. Don't forget that last year, one of the big issues with lockdown level 5, right, was Easter. So we're getting to the end of March. Easter was in early April. The church leaders, the government was saying, guys, you need to not travel. You need to stay where you are. You need to not meet. And the church leaders said to the government, no, but Easter's coming up and we travel at Easter. You can't stop us. And President Ramaphosa said, hold my beer, lockdown 5. Now, I don't think he's going to do lockdown 5 again. And I hope that the churches realize they have to have another non-traveling Easter. But I think there might be some super spreader events around all of those April holidays that we have here in South Africa. And then, of course, the thing that's not in our favor is that we then head from there into May, June, July, into winter. And this, while not being a winter disease, it certainly, COVID prefers colder weather to warmer weather. And so I think all of that put together, yeah, this is not the motivational part of the presentation, is that I think that we are in for disruption for pretty much the rest of this year. By the way, that includes countries that are getting their vaccines. So far, Israel is the furthest ahead of the curve. I'll try and steer clear of political commentary, but when we say Israel has vaccinated everybody, they've vaccinated the Jewish parts of Israel and not the Arab parts, and I'll just let that sit there as a fact. But if we only look at the Jewish people in Israel, they're close to 100% vaccination of all the people who wanted the vaccine, which is pretty much most people, and they have seen a drop off the other end of hospitalizations, deaths, and so on. So vaccines definitely work. The UK is probably second behind them, having now just crossed over the 15 million mark out of their sort of 60 or so million in total. So they're well on track to vaccinate everybody who wants to be vaccinated, probably within the next 2 to 3 months. But having said that, they are not releasing the lockdown yet. You still have to wear masks. You've still got to do physical distancing because, first of all, and history tells us why we don't do these things, you don't walk around with a big badge on you saying, I've been vaccinated. Secondly, the vaccines are not 100% effective. So they're in the 80 and 90% effective, but you don't know whether you're in the 80 or the 20% effective. So even if you've had the vaccine, or even if you know somebody else has had the vaccine, there's still no guarantees in the system. And also in the UK, they've made the decision to give people only one jab of a vaccine that was tested for 2 jabs. And that dramatically, although we don't know how much, dramatically it reduces the effectiveness. So I know there's at least one person joining us from the UK, but anybody else from the UK, you need to do as much as you possibly can to get your 2nd jab as soon as you possibly can, because this vaccine works by having 2 jabs. That's what it was tested for. Now, it's better to get 1 jab than no jabs. This is AstraZeneca, the AstraZeneca one in particular. So it's better to get 1 jab than no jabs, but it's way better to get 2 jabs than 1 jab. So it's not quite as good news as the UK would like us to think it is. And you've still, this is the point, still got to act as if other people haven't got the vaccine. So obviously in a few months' time, we'll begin to see hospitalizations coming down, or deaths will come down, and we'll begin to get that effect of, I prefer President Ramaphosa's phrase as well, population immunity rather than herd immunity. But it's still a time. Gordon, I see, thank you very much. I know you're in the queue for this, you mentioned just as we were getting going. That's what I was saying, Gordon. So technically you're supposed to get the 2nd jab within 6 to 8 weeks of the 1st jab. And in fact, for Pfizer, it's like 3 weeks. You guys are getting it 3 or 4 months later. We hope that works. I'm not going to argue whether the government made the right decision or not. Again, I'll leave it up to the scientists and the politicians to fight that one out. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing. But the point I'm making, Gordon, is that if it works, and I'm sure it will work, you've still got to wait the 3 months to get your 2nd jab, and then probably another month or 2 in order to realize that in your community, COVID is no longer being spread. And that will include a lot of antibody tests. It'll include a lot of testing of everybody to say COVID. You can then officially say, COVID is no longer in my village. COVID is no longer in my community. COVID is no longer on this train. COVID is no longer on this airplane. It's going to take a long time before we can say that. So the whole of this year is going to continue to be disrupted. Whether you're in the UK and you're in line to get a jab in the next few days, or you're in South Africa and that might still be a few months ahead. That's the real message. Now, for South Africans, maybe let me just talk quickly about how the vaccines work, if that's of any interest to you. There are 2 different types of vaccines going on here. There's the more traditional approach to vaccines, where traditionally what you've done with vaccines is you've given somebody a little bit of the disease. Because what your body does is your body's DNA, so DNA obviously is that twisted helix strand that's got like billions of instructions in it, which are the instructions for you. It's the computer code, the DNA, the genetic code that can rebuild you from scratch. It knows the color of your hair, it knows your height, it knows the color of your eyes and how good they are. It knows what foods are good for you. And so it knows every part of you and every single cell in your body. And there are more cells in your body than stars in the sky. Every single cell in your body has your genetic code, the full code. We could recreate you from just one cell in your body. So what happens is when something enters your body that doesn't match the blueprint, right? So any cell, whether it's in your nose, normally it's in your mouth, your nose, or your lungs, because we're breathing this stuff in, or it comes in through a scratch in your bloodstream. When something enters your body, and please, this is not a medical scientific explanation. This is somebody who's a teacher for a living, making a complex thing slightly simple. But when something enters your body that is not in the blueprint, right? Your body says, what the hell is this? Get rid of it. So your body doesn't like it, right? And it says, get rid of this. This is what happens whenever you get sick. It is your body responding, because sometimes this thing that's come into your body starts attacking the cells of your body. Now, your cells have to work out what on earth this thing is. What is this thing? And what is it trying to do? So it's got to work like a virus that comes into your computer. There's a reason we call them computer viruses. Comes into your computer and starts messing with your code. The computer's then got to work out, what on earth is this? What is it? What is it trying to do? And how do we defeat it? So your DNA works this out and then sends instructions through your body to say, here's how you deal with this thing. And then hopefully, for your sake, it is able to expel that thing that's come in. And sometimes it can't do it on its own. And so you've got to put medicines into your system because your body needs extra chemicals to help you. Okay, so all of that makes sense. So what we've typically done in the past is we've given you just a little bit of the disease so that your body learns to fight it, because the cool thing about DNA is it's got a memory. Every time it learns to fight something, it remembers. So that when it comes back again into your body, it says, ha, I know you and I know how to beat you. So I don't know how old you are. I'm 50 years old this year. I remember my mom taking me to a chickenpox party. That's what they did back in the day. This is the early 1980s. And when one of your mates got chickenpox, all the moms took their kids around. Why? Because if you give a little bit of exposure, your child will get chickenpox. Nice. And then you live with the pain of that for a little while. But then you've had chickenpox, right? And then you only get chickenpox once in your life. And it's probably better to have it when you're a kid. It's pretty rough when you get it as an adult. So done deal. And a lot of people think that that's still what vaccines are. We've come a long way from then. What the AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Novavax, and most of the vaccines do is something different. Your coronavirus here has it's got a weakness. Those little spikes are proteins on the coronavirus. And those spikes, it needs those spikes in order to get into your cell. So it arrives at the edge of one of your cells, and that protein spike kind of pushes its way into the cell so that the coronavirus can get inside the cell and basically kill the cell. Basically, that's how it would kill you and do damage to your cell. But we don't know yet. We don't have a vaccine to deal with the coronavirus itself. If the coronavirus gets inside the cell, your DNA can't handle it, okay? Can't deal with it. And our scientists don't know how to deal with it either. This is a very complex virus here. But, and this was the clever bit, science is so amazing. These proteins don't exist anywhere else in our body. These are specific proteins that are linked to COVID. So what we've done is, instead of giving our body an understanding of what the COVID virus is, we've just ignored the virus itself, and we've said to our body, if ever you see this protein, here's how to fight it. And that makes these vaccines incredibly safe, because what we've done is the AstraZeneca, the Johnson & Johnson, Novavax, and the other ones have all, what they do is they give you a tiny dose of the protein, not the virus. The protein itself is completely harmless. It's like if I gave you a poison pill, but I taught you to recognize the packaging that the pill was in. I can give you the packaging without the poison at all and say, anytime you see anything in this packaging, throw it away. Don't even open the package. The package itself is not dangerous at all. It's literally just a wrapper. And that's all that the vaccine gives you, is understanding of the wrapper. So for those people who are concerned that we've rushed too quickly to get this done, first of all, we haven't. We've been developing this approach to vaccines since SARS. Okay, that's decades ago. All we needed to know is what protein was on the outside of this thing and pop it into the vaccine, and now the vaccine works. So we haven't rushed it. Nobody's rushed through any testing. All the testing has been done properly. So these vaccines are incredibly safe. The Pfizer one and the Moderna one are slightly different. They're called mRNA vaccine, and they are even smarter. And I'm not going to go into the detail, but what they do is they actually go into your DNA. They don't change your DNA, right? What they do is they go and give your DNA instructions. So your DNA has got a whole part of it. Let's say it's this part of it over here that's for fighting diseases. And these are all the instructions about all the diseases you've ever fought. What the mRNA vaccine does is it comes in, it adds the instructions for this protein, and then it dissolves. If your body never meets this protein, it never accesses this part of the DNA. So it hasn't changed your DNA. It hasn't polluted your DNA. It's not going to make women sterile. It's not any protein that exists anywhere in our bodies. All of these are conspiracy theories that are being spread by conspiracy theorists online. None of that is true. It's a very specific protein. And if you take the Pfizer vaccine, your body then learns the instructions of how to fight the vaccine. Okay, maybe that's way more information than you needed. And if you have questions, bang them into the chat box. Now, somebody's asked me a private question. Let me just answer that at this point. What if you've had COVID and survived? Well, then obviously you had this in your system, your body worked out how to fight it, and now your body retains the information of how to fight it. Those are called antibodies. We don't know how long the COVID antibodies last. Chickenpox antibodies last your whole life. Once you've got them, you never lose them. Flu antibodies last less than a year, 9 months or so. And so next, if you had flu last year, you can have flu this year, you can have it again next year. And flu changes. A new variant comes and your body doesn't recognize it. And so we don't know. We don't know how long your immunity to COVID will last. We're pretty certain that if you've had COVID, especially if you had a reasonably bad version of it, that your antibodies will last at least 6 months, but we don't know. We're not sure yet. So science is still working this out. Also, we don't know whether the new variants are close enough to the old one that your body still recognizes them, or whether the new variants are new enough that your body doesn't recognize them. We just don't know. That, again, is part of the reason why we are going to be disrupted for a while, because the vaccines are not a silver bullet. So let's just talk quickly about the vaccines in South Africa. For those outside of South Africa, just a quick bit of South African information here. We originally were given the AstraZeneca vaccine 2 weeks ago. 1 million doses arrived. The AstraZeneca vaccine is not that effective against the South African variant. We didn't know that at the time when we ordered it. That came out literally while the plane was in the air to us. But there are 3 things a vaccine's trying to do. Ideally, the vaccine needs to kill the virus. I mean, that'd be perfect. If the virus came into you and you had the vaccine and the virus died in your body and was never spread again, that'd be the perfect vaccine. None of these vaccines do that. The second thing that you want the vaccine to do is, if you get the virus, you want to not die. Okay, so you want to reduce the impact that the virus has on your body. And all of these, including the AstraZeneca one, do that, including for the South African variant. So there is an argument that we should still give the AstraZeneca vaccine to people in South Africa, because it won't stop the spread of the disease, but it will stop you dying. It stops you getting the very bad version of it. And I think the government might still be thinking about this. They announced yesterday they're trying to sell the 1 million doses of AstraZeneca that they've bought, and that there are lots of people lining up who don't have the South African variant who wanting to buy it. But I wonder if in the next few weeks they might say, you know what, we're going to inject not the frontline workers with AstraZeneca, but maybe other people. Why not frontline workers? Because the third thing you want a vaccine to do is to stop being infectious. You don't want to infect people. Most frontline workers are not going to die of COVID because they're younger people. They're not in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. But we don't want to just reduce their ability to get sick. We actually want to stop their ability to get infected. And that's why we're not using the AstraZeneca vaccine now, because our primary focus now is on our frontline workers. The good news is that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine looks as if it is still effective against the South African variant. It was just yesterday, it was announced that it has, there's technical stuff we don't need to go into unless you ask me, I can give you the details. But it hasn't been fast-tracked for approval. It has been given rolling research rollout approval, which comes in 4 different phases, and it's now been given second phase approval. Anyway, all of the detail is irrelevant, except to say we can now start giving people the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We should have 1 million doses coming in early next week. I believe there are already 80,000 doses in the country, so we can start vaccinating people. So let's also talk about other medications, because of course people are trying everything. We're seeing science work in real time here. And so people have tried all sorts of things. A year ago, people were saying just, ibuprofen and Panados, that's all you need. And then vitamin D, which, by the way, is huge. You should be dosing up on vitamin D. You can also add vitamin C and zinc. Honestly, every doctor in the world says that's worth doing. So if you haven't been doing that, still worth starting. Vitamin D in particular, and then vitamin C and zinc. And there are a few others as well. So there's some things you can do to boost your natural immunity. But of course, the big one has been ivermectin. There was a hydroxychloride, but I think most doctors have said, no, definitely not. So ivermectin is a remarkable drug, invented many decades ago. More than 2 billion people around the world have taken it. It's used a lot with vets at the moment, not so much used in humans anymore, but it's for parasites. It's not for bacteria. I mean, it's for bacteria that causes parasites in your body, river blindness disease and things like that. It's not for viruses. And so ivermectin is not a cure. What it does is it has the potential, at least, hypothetical potential, of dealing with the impact that COVID has on your body. One of the biggest reasons people die is that your body overreacts to the virus, and it causes a collapse of your lungs, and your lungs filling up with fluid, and ivermectin can stop that happening. The problem is that in laboratory settings, you have to take 60 times the normally accepted dosage of ivermectin. So ivermectin for river blindness disease or parasites, there's a certain dosage you take, and you've got to take like multiple times more than that for it to be effective. And so we still don't quite know how to use ivermectin. And if you take too much ivermectin, it can cause more problems than COVID causes. It can cause blindness, internal bleeding, all sorts of things. So ivermectin should not be self-medicated. B, you should not take animal ivermectin for human beings. Two different drugs completely. I've got lots of vet friends who've had to hide their ivermectin because people have come in and asked for it. And thirdly, you should do what the South African government has now done, which is only use it when somebody's dying. It's not something you put in your body to prevent you getting COVID or whatever. If somebody is going to die, if somebody's lungs are filling up and you kind of think, what else can we do? Well, then the doctors are saying, you might as well try ivermectin. That's what we know about ivermectin at the moment. There are some companies working on it to work out how to get it into our systems in a slightly different way, maybe to help us to prevent the disease. But that's what I know about ivermectin at the moment. So where are we now? And then I'm going to pause for questions. We have reduced the death rate dramatically, which is remarkable. Well done to the medical fraternity around the world. Less than 1% of people who get COVID will die. That's great news now. And sorry, I'm sort of being a bit flippant as I say that quickly. For those of you who have had bereavements in your family, obviously we give our condolences, and we recognize every one of the 2.5 million people who have passed away, 47,000 here in South Africa. So I'm not trying to minimize that. Sorry if that wasn't my intention in how I said that, but we've done a great job of reducing the death rate, learning how to deal with this disease. The problem is that 20% of people get a bad version of COVID, which impacts one or other organ in their body. We don't know why it hits some people and not others. We don't know why it hits some organs and not others. It can hit your brain, it can hit your lungs, it can hit your heart, it can hit your kidneys, it can hit your pancreas. I heard of a 17-year-old vice captain of his school rugby team. Hit his pancreas, he turned diabetic overnight. He will have diabetes the rest of his life because he went to a party and got COVID. And we just don't know. Is that as healthy as you can imagine? We just don't understand this disease. And they're calling it long COVID now. And 20% of people are in danger of having deep, serious impacts on one or other part of their body that will be lifelong after COVID. So please, can we just stop obsessing about the death rate and saying this is not a dangerous disease because only a few people die? Or worse, only the old people die, as if the old people are nothing and we're allowed to let them die. And I've never understood that attitude. But if that's your attitude, fine, you can have, choose your own attitude. But that's not the big issue now. The big issue is this long COVID, this 20% of people. Then add to that, and I think you'll probably pick up this conversation next week from an insurance perspective and maybe even a legal perspective, the deep, significant stress that people are under, trauma, I would use, through a variety of things, through economic difficulty, through lack of social interaction, through stress and strain of the system, through actual disease, just through the stress of what we've gone through. I think we're going to be dealing with the after effects of COVID for the rest of our lives. But where we are right now, where we are for this year in South Africa, is vaccines will be rolling out, literally starting later this week or at the latest next week. There's a plan for the government to roll this out. Training is well underway for doing it. Looks as if the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is going to be the one that works best for us. We probably will get some Pfizer vaccines. We probably will use the AstraZeneca vaccines when we get down to the people in their 30s and 40s. We'll probably get as many people as want to be vaccinated by the end of this year. We will go through a third wave, but hopefully we can minimize the impact. We will have to be dealing with disruption for all of the rest of this year, I think. I don't know if that's motivational or not. I hope it was informative. I hope it was helpful. I hope it helps you to make a decision about what you're going to do. For me personally and my family, we will get the vaccines as soon as we possibly can. And we will be part of helping to reach this population immunity when about 70% of people have had the vaccine. We can wait another month or two, do tests in office blocks, in schools, in suburbs, in communities. And once we find that we are COVID free, whatever normal is at that point, we can get back to it. So just one final reminder, and I know we are being recorded, so I want to just put this on the record again. I'm not a medical professional, but I have listened to lots of medical professionals, tried to distill the truth from the chaos, and my focus is on scenarios, working out scenarios about how things will play out. But now I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. So let's have a look here. So we've got a few questions. Let me take them as we came in. So, right, sorry, Dale, I did see your question earlier. You asked, why is there a gap between the quality of our scientists and medical experts and the fact that we haven't even issued one vaccine yet. So, Dale, that's a great question, and there's a number of answers. The first is what our president has called, and a number of other people now, by the way, have called vaccine nationalism. When SARS came up a number of years ago, there was a company in Australia that released an early prototype of a vaccine for SARS. It was right near the end of the SARS pandemic, but they came up and they said, we think we've got an answer here. It was an Australian company, and the Australian government jumped in and basically nationalized the company and said that this company had to supply the entire Australian population before it was allowed to get any international orders. The company took them to court, if I remember the story correctly. But anyway, as it happens, the SARS virus faded out before they actually had something to bring to market. But everybody was a little bit scared about that, to say this is a private company. You can't have one country just saying because the vaccine was developed in our country, now we get first dibs at it. And so there was this international pact. And COVAX, which Africa is part of, was part of that. Not the same thing, but part of that, where a lot of African and other countries, especially third world countries, got together and said, we will create a consortium that will buy vaccines on behalf of all of us, because, you know, third world, what chance do third world countries have? And a lot of the first world countries signed an agreement about you know, if ever we were in the situation that there would be this equity. Well, the rich nations have just thrown that out the window. The rich nations have just said, me first, me first, me first. I mean, Canada bought 10 times as much vaccine as it needs. Now, what Canada has said is, once we vaccinated everybody, we will donate. We won't even sell. We will donate all of our excess vaccines to the rest of the world, but me first. And so part of the answer to your question, Dale, is that just, if you're rich, you can buy a vaccine. And we are not rich as South Africans. The second reason is that the first vaccine was only announced in late November, in late October, and approval was only granted in late November internationally. So we're not even 1 quarter, we're not even 3 months. I mean, let's talk in weeks, right? We're not even 15 weeks away from the first vaccine being available. Yes, about 40 or 50 countries have had vaccines, and we like to think in South Africa that we punch above our weight and we should be in the top 50 in the world. And maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, I don't know. But we're not in the bottom half, we're not the last in line. You know, 250 odd nations, and we're kind of in the 50 to 100 range, which is probably fair. That's probably where we play. That's probably who we are. So far, I think we're kind of on track. So anyway, that's my answer to that question. But of course, now we're getting into some places where you'll disagree, and there will be political thoughts there as well. W. Gullum says, I'm a 50-year-old type 1 diabetic. My head tells me that the vaccine will be okay if I take it. You know what? I can't answer a medical question. You'd need to ask your doctor or your healthcare provider. You'd need to get some view on that. From what I can see, so I am a 50-year-old asthmatic, right? So the bottom 20% of my lungs do not work. I've had asthma my whole life, only diagnosed in my 30s when the bottom half of my lungs were already broken. And I thought initially that I was high risk because, of course, it's a lung disease. As it happens, bizarrely, and I did actually have a slide for this because I just thought it was so fascinating, people who use inhalers like I do, we're actually less at risk than others, because apparently some of the drugs in these inhalers, I don't know, there's like a Boscocupan or something like that. Anyway, there's some drug in my inhaler that actually helps to not get the bad version of COVID. So it doesn't stop me getting COVID, but it means I'm probably not going to get the bad version of COVID. Who would have thought, right? Asthmatics who've been taking their medication are probably not as high risk as you would have thought. So, I mean, honestly, this is a crazy disease, and so you would need to get medical advice. My understanding is that the only people who need to be seriously concerned about possible side effects for the vaccines would be people with serious autoimmune diseases. I wouldn't think diabetics is a problem, but I'm not giving you medical advice. Ask the question. So what are the side effects people have experienced following receipt of the vaccine? So Jonathan, great question. Here, think about this. If we took 1 million people today and you asked them to roll up their sleeves and you took a Sharpie and you put a dot on their arm, okay? 1 million people, you put a Sharpie dot on their arm. 150 of those people would be dead by Friday, because that's how many people die, okay? About 350 of them would have been diagnosed with a serious disease. About 100 of those would have cancer by Friday. It's got nothing, the point I'm trying to make, it's got nothing to do with the dot. If you just waved your arm over there, if you met 1 million people this week, 150 of them would be dead by the end of the week. Random people. Now, if you are giving the vaccine to people over the age of 70, well, those numbers go up exponentially. So first of all, that's what medical professionals are trying to do, is trying to work out, if you give somebody the vaccine and 5 days later they die, were they going to die anyway, or was it the vaccine that killed them? And that's obviously part of it. And right now, the medical professionals are 99.9999999% confident that the vaccine is not having any other effects than what it's supposed to have in your body. Every now and again, somebody who's got a massive allergy problem has an allergic reaction. Those people carry EpiPens. So we're not talking about just somebody who, it's that time of year, my nose is running. We're talking about people who will die if they're peanuts in the same building as them. And those people, they carry EpiPens. And when they've had a vaccine, they've had an allergic reaction. But these people have allergic reactions to being in the same room as peanuts. So you give them the EpiPen, and 2 hours later, they've recovered. For everybody else, your body has been given the blueprint for a disease, and it has to spread that information through every cell of your body so your body's ready to fight the disease. You haven't been given the disease, that's what I said. You've been given the blueprint of how to fight the disease. What that feels like in your body as the blueprint gets spread through your cells. This is not medical science, I'm telling you here. This is the teacher's explanation of the 3-hour lecture that the doctors will give you. What happens is you feel a little bit miff, so you feel you've got a bit of a headache, you feel a little bit stiff, a little bit achy in your body, and some people have said they felt a little bit nauseous. Everybody has said that goes away after about 2 days. Great question. Thanks, Jonathan. I hope that answers that. Could there be a fourth wave? Justin, absolutely. There could be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 waves. I hate to tell you this, but one of the biggest outbreaks of disease in human history was called the Justinian Pandemic. It lasted for 72 years. This is not the motivational part of the presentation. Some people don't know that the bubonic plague still exists. Every now and again, there's a little outbreak of bubonic plague, right? That's the Black Death that killed the quarter of the world's population 500 years ago, is still in the system. The only difference is we know what it looks like. We've got medicines to deal with it. When we see it, we fix it quickly. Like Ebola and other things, we know what it looks like. We've got medicines, we contain it, we deal with it. It is possible that that's what COVID will become. A disease that just lives in the system, that we take a It's part of our annual shots that we go to the doctor for. And maybe some of you will now get the flu shot every year because you realize, did you know how dangerous flu was before COVID? I didn't. So, you know, we might have a booster that we need to have in order to keep this at bay. I don't think we know yet. But yes, if we don't take this seriously, COVID will continue to mutate, continue to get more and more dangerous for us, and continue to spread. And people who've had it before will get it again. And that's why we've still got to be in lockdown. We're not in lockdown because there's some third force government thing. We're not in lockdown because the globalists want to control us. We're in lockdown because this is a pandemic that can destroy human life, ultimately. Yes, only 1% of people die, but that can change if the mutation keeps happening. So if this thing just comes round and around and around, every time it comes around, it gets worse. But there's also that 20% of people who are getting other complications, massive, massive, massive health issues rolling through the system. That's why we've still got to take it seriously. Ah, Mark, what does the new normal look like? I think the only thing we can say about the new normal is it's not a repeat of the old normal. I think we might have to learn to live with COVID. I think a lot of what the new normal looks like we already are in. I think there'll be less business travel, less face-to-face meetings. Only the things that absolutely require us to be face-to-face will be. I mean, you might not think this is the greatest thing we're doing today. You might want to be in a room with your mates, but we don't have to be. I'd much rather be able to come around and have a braai with you guys next Friday and sit around and chat and go to a rugby match than sit in a meeting like this. So there'll be some things like this, like going into an office, like rush hour traffic, that I don't think will ever come back. But I think we will get back to meeting together in crowds, having weddings, going to sports events. And I think it'll just be a case of us maybe having our vaccines. Maybe there'll be a vaccine passport that will allow you to travel internationally. So you don't need it to live your normal life. But if you want to travel, this already exists, right? You can't go to Brazil unless you've got a yellow fever vaccination. So it's not as if that's some weird police state coming up. We know what this looks like if there's a disease that is endemic in the system. Right, I see that there are, in fact, now I've probably answered most of the questions here, but we are at the top of the hour. So let's call it quits there. If you have other questions, please send them to the team at I2. They'll pick them up and they'll get the insurance and legal view. But if there are any other medical questions, they can also tap into their medical team and get you some of those details for next week. I hope this has been useful. I hope this has been helpful for us to just maybe bring. I'm concerned about hysteria. I'm concerned about confusion. I'm concerned about fake information. And I'm concerned about an overemphasis on just getting the economy going again, regardless of the human cost. I think generally, governments around the world, they've made mistakes here and there. They're making it up as they go along. Nobody's ever lived through a global pandemic before. But I think generally we're kind of muddling through and getting ourselves in the right direction. Let's hope we get the right vaccines as soon as we possibly can, wherever you happen to find yourself. And if you can take the vaccine, I hope you choose to do so, so that we can move beyond COVID and begin to deal with all the other disruptors that still await us in the rest of the 2020s, from artificial intelligence and Terminator robots in our factories to climate change and melting ice caps and Donald Trump's second term in 2024. There's a hell of a lot to look forward to. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good stuff. Thank you so much.